How difficult is it to actually get published? What work do you have to do to finally get your book into a bookstore? And why does it appear so easy for other writers to get published? And you're sitting back wondering, where's my book? Why am I not getting published? We're going to be dealing with that, and we're going to be answering those questions. And we start right now. Amateur writers have this idea that you can write a book, get it published, become a millionaire, and live in a big giant house and have a lot of fancy cars. And all you have to do is publish one book, because it appears as though that's what happens to other people. They write a book, get published, and become famous. And a lot of amateur writers are thinking, well, why doesn't that happen to me? I've written a book, I've sent it out, it's only been rejected. Or some writers actually do get published, and the book doesn't sell millions. It's not made into a movie. They're not driving fancy cars. And they're wondering, why is it so easy for other famous writers like Stephen King, Dan Brown? Why are they rich and famous? Why is writing easy for them? The truth of the matter is, it's never been easy for anybody. Even Stephen King was rejected. People have this idea that Carrie was the first book that Stephen King wrote. He wrote it in a couple of days, sent it out, it was accepted, sold millions, made into a movie, and he was living on Easy Street. Well, Stephen King will be the first one to tell you that's not so. He wrote many books. He wrote Rage, The Long Walk, The Running Man. He submitted those and they were all rejected. He was writing Carrie and gave up on it because he didn't even believe in it. He submitted it and they wanted him to change the ending. So he changed the ending and it was finally published. But Stephen King will tell you that he wasn't living on Easy Street. Even while he was writing Carrie, it was extremely difficult. He had a full daytime job as a teacher, living in a trailer, married, he had children. He could only write after midnight when the kids had gone to bed and he had finished grading all the papers. And he was sitting down in a small little desk next to the washing machine using his wife's typewriter because his wasn't working. And it was a massive struggle for him. He didn't know he was going to become the famous Stephen King we know him today. He struggled, and there were many times he had doubts. When he submitted his other books, Rage, The Long Walk, The Running Man, like everyone else, he was convinced that they were going to be accepted right away, get published, and he would become a millionaire, only for them all to be rejected. And it wasn't until his third or fourth book that he actually started making money and living a nice, easier life. But when we think of Stephen King, we never pictured him having to struggle. But if you ask him, he will tell you horror stories about not being able to pay bills, not having enough food for his kids. He never even had a working telephone in his house. If he wanted to make a phone call, he literally had to go down the street and put a quarter into a telephone booth and make a call. He couldn't afford food, his car was breaking down, and it was a massive struggle. But we don't see that. We don't see the struggle that authors go through before they become famous. We always picture them famous. We never picture their struggle, how hard it is for them to write their novel. Some of the most famous novels were written 3 or 4 or 5 times. Some writers take years to write one novel. They have a job, they have kids, they have bills to pay. It's not an easy street for anybody. Even Dan Brown, who's famous for writing the Da Vinci Code that sold 80 million copies. Today, Dan Brown lives in a massive house. He's living on Easy Street. But what people don't realize is that he had actually written 3 books before the Da Vinci Code, and they all did not sell. They barely made any money at all. He had to do his own promotion for his first book, and he had to travel all across America, setting up his own interviews, doing his own autograph signings, and it still did not help. He wrote the Da Vinci Code in his mother's basement while putting his typewriter on an ironing board while he sat down on milk cartons. Today we look at the success of the Da Vinci Code, selling 80 million copies. And we think, wow, that must be so easy. Writing is easy. It looks so straightforward. It can only take a couple of days to write a book and become a millionaire. But the reality is, it's a massive struggle, even for the most famous writers out there. Tom Clancy, who wrote The Hunt for Red October, he could only write 1 page a day while on his way to work, in a train, while putting a big heavy laptop on his lap. It was the only time of day that he had to write, and he could only write 1 page a day. And those laptops back then were heavy, and they weren't easy to carry around. He had a job, he had a life. He couldn't afford to write 10 or 15 pages a day. He could only afford 1 page a day. But he did. He worked hard, and his book ended up being published. It was read by Ronald Reagan, the president, who recommended it, and the book went on to become massively successful, being made into a movie. It was only then that Tom Clancy lived on Easy Street, having a good life. But the struggle while writing it wasn't easy. Too many amateur writers think that all writers have a good, easy life. Well, J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, was living on welfare, and she didn't have enough money to feed her child. And yet she wrote Harry Potter in a coffee shop. She bought only 1 coffee a day. And she couldn't even afford that, but she did it because she didn't want the owner kicking her out for taking up space. So she bought 1 coffee, and that lasted all day while she wrote Harry Potter. And today when we think of J.K. Rowling, we think, look at all the money, the success, the fame, and we think, wow, writing's easy. She's had it easy her entire life. But the fact is, she struggled while she was writing she didn't know that the Harry Potter books were going to become successful. She hoped they would, but there were no guarantees. And yet she struggled on. She pushed on, just like all writers have to push on. It's not easy for anybody. Even the most famous writers had to struggle before their book became famous. And yet there are a lot of amateurs out there who write a novel, and because they struggled just a little bit, they quit, thinking, why isn't it easy for me? Why am I getting rejection letters? Stephen King talked about how he had a collection of rejection letters back when he was younger, and he thought he would get maybe 1 or 2 of them. He ended up getting a whole handful of them, and he kept them all as motivation to try harder. But even the most successful writers get rejected. They did not always start off being famous and rich and have writing easy for them. Some of the most successful novels took maybe 10 to 15 years to write, and they had to do rewrites because they were getting rejected. So as an amateur, don't go quitting because it's slightly difficult for you. Can you imagine if Stephen King gave up after he tried writing Carrie and it didn't work, so he just quit? We would never have any of his books today. Imagine if Dan Brown gave up after 1 of 2 or 3 books that he wrote that didn't sell. We would not have the Da Vinci Code. Imagine if J.K. Rowling gave up at the very beginning. We would not have anything of the Harry Potter books. But yet they didn't quit. They struggled on. And as an amateur, you can learn from this. You can realize that it's not easy, but you have to keep pushing on as they did. The struggle is the reward. You shouldn't be writing for the money. You write for the love of writing because you love creating characters and bringing them to life. If you're in it for the money, that's going to be difficult motivation because royalty checks take a long time to come in, and they may not be as big as you think you want them to be. But writers write because they love writing. And it's not easy. Ask any writer. Go look into a bookstore now. Find any book and ask the writer, was it easy to write that? And they will laugh. They will tell you that it was a nightmare. But they pushed on. They carried on. And they finally got published. But they did not give up. And they too probably thought, well, writing's easy. and all writers become millionaires after their first book, only for them to realize that it's a struggle. And as a writer, you have to keep pushing on and know that it's the love of writing that motivates you. Always remember, quitting is easy. Pushing on is difficult. It's easy for anybody to quit, but your dream is to write. So no matter how difficult it is, keep pushing on. And look at the benefits. Dan Brown wrote 3 books that did not sell at all. And after his 4th book became successful, people went back and started buying his other 3 books. And they now have gone on to sell millions. So if you write a book and it doesn't sell, don't give up. Because your 2nd or 3rd novel might be the big one, the big successful $1 million one. And then people will go back and buy your previous work. Dan Brown's Angels and Demons didn't sell. And then when the Da Vinci Code sold and was made into a movie, all of a sudden, the book called Angels and Demons that didn't sell, well, it was made into a movie, and it made millions of dollars and sold millions of copies. Dan Brown didn't know when he wrote Angels and Demons and it didn't sell. He didn't know that, hey, one day people are going to buy this. But he wrote the Da Vinci Code, and then people went back and bought his previous work. So as a writer, if your first book doesn't sell, remember, your 2nd book might, and that's going to cause people to go back to buy your first. And then all of a sudden, the book that you wanted to sell millions actually does. So don't give up after your first, because it might be your 3rd or 4th that becomes your big one. And then people go back to buy the other. And unfortunately, there are some writers who become famous after death. They never actually see their success. They never see their books selling in the millions. It would be nice if they could experience that. If you could talk to them and let them know that book you wrote, the one that bombed, that you gave up on, the one that you wanted to sell but didn't, well, it did. Sadly, it sold after they passed on. But at least their book is being read today by millions of people. So, in a weird way, maybe you'll write a book that may not sell, but a couple of years after you passed on, that book might actually become that big bestseller you always wanted it to be. A book doesn't have to sell while you're alive to be successful. It would be nice so you can see it happen. But there are many writers out there whose books become successful after they die. But at least the book is being sold. And take this opportunity now to check out this video on why the middle of your story is the weakest and what you can do to bridge the beginning and the ending to make an amazing novel that people will love to read. And be sure to check out my website. I'll leave a description, my website address down below, so you can visit my site and check out all the blogs that I have that can help you become an amazing writer, because I want you to get published. I want to help you. I want to do everything that I can that helps you become a published author. Don't forget to subscribe to my videos, so every time I post a new video, you'll be able to watch it right away and get amazing tips on helping you become a great writer. And click the like button, and if you want, leave a comment. Let me know what you think and feel about the struggle and how difficult it is for writers, and how we don't know their struggle. We don't see it. We only see the success, thinking it's easy. But we know that it's not.